When John, a 65-year-old man, first heard from his doctor that his fatigue, low libido, and persistent sluggishness were just age, he resigned himself to it, like so many others. He was advised to rest more, take vitamins, and, most frustratingly, not to worry. But a few months later, he was rushed to the hospital with chest pain, shortness of breath, and strange numbness in his legs. Everyone assumed it was a heart attack. But his heart was fine. The problem lay elsewhere, in his pelvic blood vessels, which were so narrowed and clogged that blood could barely get through. That was the real wake-up call. John had no idea that circulation problems could manifest not only in the heart or legs, but also in the very part of him that defined his masculinity. It's not something people talk about openly. Intimacy, closeness, confidence, all things that fade not because of age, but because of poor blood flow. Weak circulation erodes health quietly but deeply. It doesn't just drain your energy, it chips away at your inner strength, the very thing that makes you feel like a man, a partner, a living being. I've been a doctor for over 30 years, and I see this story play out time and again. A man senses something is off, but stays silent. The doctor reassures him. Time passes, and yet the situation is often entirely reversible. Not instantly, not magically, but realistically. The cause isn't old age. The cause is lack of information, the silence around simple ways to care for the body, especially the blood vessels. One of the methods I often talk about is the use of ordinary baking soda. It may sound strange. We usually associate it with baking or cleaning. But baking soda, a natural regulator of acid-alkaline balance, can gently support the vascular system when used wisely. It affects blood viscosity, helps vessels retain their elasticity, and stimulates the production of nitric oxide, a compound directly linked to male health and sexual response. It's important to emphasize, baking soda is not a miracle cure, but as part of a holistic approach, it can be the start of a much bigger journey to recovery. That journey doesn't begin with medication, but with understanding. Understanding that age is not a sentence. It's a chance to rethink self-care, to learn how to listen to your body, to support it, and to reclaim a lost quality of life. It all begins with the question, what if I can change this? Walter walked into my office one summer day, wearing a light shirt and a strained smile. He was 68, and outwardly he looked well. Tall, neatly dressed, with a straight posture. But his eyes, they told a different story. He didn't start with a complaint, but with a question. Doctor, maybe this is just who I am now. It wasn't a question about health. It was a cry for help. Restrained, masculine, but no less profound. I invited him to sit down, and we began to talk. At first, he spoke in general terms. He used to go to bed closer to midnight. Now he falls asleep by 9. He wakes up feeling drained. During the day, he finds himself indifferent to things that once brought him joy. His hands were always cold, even now, in the summer. I listened carefully, giving him space. Finally, after a pause, he admitted, "Intimacy with my wife has become rare. It feels like we live side by side, not together. And the hardest part is, I don't know how to fix it." He's not alone. Walter's story mirrors those of hundreds of men who've sat in that same chair. As we age, our blood vessels gradually lose elasticity. Blood, especially through the smallest capillaries, begins to flow more slowly. This doesn't just cause cold extremities, it reduces nourishment to tissues, including those responsible for intimacy, physical response, and bodily warmth. As a result, What a man considers core to his identity begins to slip away. The ability to feel desired, confident, alive. It happens slowly, silently, and is often dismissed as just aging. But the truth is, it's not a life sentence. It's the outcome of a body that's been overworked and undersupported for too long. Men like Walter haven't forgotten how to be themselves. They've simply grown distant from the feeling of being alive, without knowing why. And instead of seeking help, they withdraw, grow apart from their partners, burdened by guilt, shame, and a sense of helplessness that has no real foundation. It's painful, it's unfair, and it can be changed. When I told Walter that many of his symptoms were signs of impaired circulation, not the end of manhood, he froze. He was silent for a long time, then asked, "Is there anything I can do?" And I replied, "Not only can you must, because you're still here. You're still alive. And your life isn't over." Harold was a calm, quiet, and reserved man. A former math teacher, he was used to living by routine, relying on logic and well-tested solutions. But unfortunately, when it came to what was happening with his body, logic seemed to have disappeared. "Doctor," he once told me, "I've tried everything. Vitamins, special supplements, even some strange devices I read about on forums. Nothing helps. I feel like a stranger in my own body." His voice was soft, almost apologetic. He wasn't asking for a magic cure. He wanted to understand. The fatigue, apathy, loss of desire, cold hands and feet, it all came in waves. I looked at him and saw a familiar picture. A man tired not just in body, but in spirit. So I asked him what might have seemed like a strange question. "Harold, do you have baking soda in your kitchen?" He looked surprised. "For baking?" "Sure. But why?" I explained. "As we age, our bodies gradually shift toward acidity. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because kidney function declines, stress builds up, and our diet changes. And increased acidity affects the blood vessels. It makes them less elastic, worsens blood flow, and reduces oxygen delivery to tissues. The smallest capillaries suffer most, the ones responsible for warmth, energy, and intimate sensitivity. Baking soda, or sodium bicarbonate, is a substance that, in small doses, can help balance the body's acid-alkaline environment. It's not a drug, but a gentle buffer. When used correctly, under supervision, and with health conditions taken into account, it can improve circulation and restore a sense of lightness that many people haven't felt in years. Harold listened, silently, nodding. I gave him clear instructions. A quarter teaspoon of baking soda dissolved in a glass of water on an empty stomach once a day. We agreed to monitor how he felt, not to rush, and not to expect instant miracles. And after just 3 weeks, he came back with his first words of hope. "Doctor, I'm waking up again with the feeling that I want to move. That used to be normal. Now, it feels like a gift." He wasn't fully recovered yet, but his eyes had changed. There was curiosity, liveliness, a slight flush in his cheeks. This wasn't the result of baking soda alone. It was the result of him starting to believe, not in a remedy, but in a possibility, that the body can respond, that not everything is lost, that change is possible if you give yourself a chance. Harold's progress inspired me, but it also reminded me of another case. Dennis, 70 years old, a strong, athletic man who loved golf and morning walks. He was active, energetic, and, as he put it, didn't feel his age. But one day, He came across an article online praising the benefits of baking soda for circulation. Without consulting a doctor, he started taking a full teaspoon of baking soda twice a day, hoping for quick results. Within a week, he experienced bloating, weakness, his blood pressure began to fluctuate, and he ended up in the hospital with arrhythmia. It turned out his kidneys, already slightly weakened by age, couldn't handle the increased sodium load. When we met afterward, he was upset and embarrassed. I just wanted to feel better, but I made things worse. I explained to him that baking soda is indeed a powerful agent, but its power demands respect. It's not a vitamin you can take just in case. It's a compound that affects acid-alkaline balance, fluid, and electrolyte levels, and the cardiovascular system. Those who take blood pressure medications, suffer from chronic kidney disease, or don't monitor their sodium intake need to be especially cautious. Even though baking soda may seem harmless, like water or salt, it's important to remember, age makes the body more sensitive to changes. The internal balance isn't as flexible as it once was. Any intervention must be precise and deliberate. That's why I always recommend starting small. A quarter teaspoon of baking soda in a full glass of water, only in the morning, strictly on an empty stomach. Never increase the dose unnecessarily. Never take it before bed, and never combine it with fatty foods. And above all, drink enough water throughout the day. Baking soda only works in a well-hydrated body. This isn't just chemistry, it's care. And even more importantly, don't rush. Everything great within the body happens slowly. We can't force our vessels to rejuvenate overnight, but we can create the conditions for them to live, breathe, and pulse again. One glass of water, one small spoon of baking soda, one sincere intention. And the journey begins. Dennis understood that. He started small. And a month later, when he said, "I can feel warmth in my hands again, and not just there," I knew his body had begun to listen to itself again. Because self-respect, that's the first step toward bringing life back.